Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Laurence, please.
Should we begin now?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So we are delighted to present our work on AI-enhanced nudging and standardization. This day in the European AI Week. Hello?
Laurence, please. Should we begin now? Yes.
Could you begin now? Okay. So we are delighted to present our work on AI-enhanced nudging and standardization. And we present this work at the European AI Week. First, we would like to present our background. So I'm professor on AI at Sorbonne University and at the CNRS in France. And my expertise is on human-machine affective interaction and ethics. I am member of several ethical committees and the JPI about AI and the future of work. And I am here with a casquette of convener of the ad hoc group 6 on this topic, AI-enhanced nudging at the GTC 21 San Senelec. So Enrico, could you present
Hi, everybody.
yourself?
Yes, hi, everybody. It's very nice to be here today. I'm working with Laurence at San Senelec in the ad hoc group 6 for AI-enhanced nudging. We started together with the French Standardization Institute at the AFNOR. And I have a background in philosophy. I am a data ethicist and AI ethicist. I've worked in Italy and now I'm living in France. And I'm being part of several international groups that are working on AI ethics. The biggest one is For Humanity. I'm a For Humanity fellow, and we are trying to build audit for automatic AI systems. And so today we are together to talk about AI-enhanced nudging. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. I just would like to add also something from 2017 and 2019. I was involved in the IEEE Global Initiative for Ethical Consideration in the Design of Autonomous Systems. And I was leading the P7008 driving nudging to robotics, intelligence, and autonomous systems. So this is now the time to explain more what is the concept of nudge. So a nudge is a technique that consists in encouraging individuals to change their behavior without constraining them using their cognitive bias. So this subject was presented by Richard Thaler, who is a Nobel Prize in economy, in behavioral economy, in 2017. So the key insight of the domain is the fact that the user interface is designed to influence the choice, even unintentionally, which is a very important thing to understand. Heuristic and biases influences offline, but also online behavior, but also offline behavior. And through this design, we can test a lot of way to finally modify the behavior of the user of systems. So there is two kind of design or two kind of architecture. Mechanism is the right term. A digital nudge or a digital sludge. What is the difference? A digital nudge is an almost imperceptible incentive in the design of a digital system to drive behavior that is supposed to improve personal or collective well-being. Finally, at the contrary, sludge, which is also often called dark pattern, use a way to modify the fact that you want to go in a direction. So bring some, how I can explain that, some idea to modify your way you want to choose things, but with avoiding solution. It's not the same, the contrary, finally. And both digital nudge and sludge use familiar online technologies such as email, pop-ups, web interface, smart wages, and we will see example with robots, social robots, for example, but many different applications. So what is exactly AI-enhanced nudging? It's the idea to use artificial intelligence model that can perceive your behavior or emotions, for example. This is my area of research, and subtly modifies the architecture of choice, for example, the tone of the voice assistant or the recommendation system or different things in the architecture in order to influence your decision or action. And there are already several, finally, application of this kind of system for health, education, environment. We can briefly explain more if you want at the end what kind of project already exists. One important point is to understand the vulnerabilities of people in front of the machine. Because AI-enhanced nudging's persuasive power and intrusive capacity can also cause subliminal manipulations, which is a term that European Commission use in the AI Act, and profound and long-lasting changes in the behavior of users, consumers, patients, children, workers, and so on. And especially for children and vulnerable people, but also for the problem of gender or racial discrimination, we must be aware about the risk due to the use of this kind of techniques. So if this mechanism, nudging mechanism, may become dangerous or raise nudging mechanism may become dangerous or raise serious ethical issues, and that can undermine the level of trust in the system and cause detrimental changes to society, the environment, and the market, which is important also to understand. So standard is in fact to help the economy, to help the world of industry to develop this kind of innovative system. In most cases, we want to use this kind of strategy for positive effect. For example, through nudging, organizations can collect, parse, and crunch their stakeholders' data on a large scale and use this data to train their algorithm and target users through personalized nudges, such as push notification, rewards, and so on. And we know that with advance in AI and machine learning, deep learning, and the BERT and a lot of new technologies, we can adjust in real time based on user feedback the way the system behaves. And it's very effective in triggering behavioral change. So we can show you after some example, but yeah, it's used, for example, personalized nudges for tackle the climate crisis, for to improve treatment outcome, to improve learning, and we will see some example after that. This example in the first one, for example, is a Fitbit system. Maybe you know well this kind of object, and Fitbit challenge reveal that there is a clear correlation between a smart device with this nudging system, reminder to move, or other kind of things with a sound, with other kind of signs to remind to you to do exercise. It's very, very incentivation among employers to engage in healthy behavior. So there is several studies showing good results using this kind of object. And there is other kind of object like that used in a lot of applications. The other one, the Duolingo, for example, in Duolingo, you can receive emails that say that the system is sad because you have not practiced the language you are learning. So these kind of examples are exactly nudge. Another kind, Moxie, it's a social robot, a kind of companion robot, AI-enhanced nudging for autistic children. So children engage in creative play with Moxie, drawing, storytelling, mindfulness, practice, and more, that helps promote important life skills such as the conversation, turn talking, emotion regulation, how to make friends, and so on. And Moxie can learn in real time to recognize the child's face and their particular learning needs. And parents can track their child's progress through the companion parents app. Let's show you an example.
Riley. Riley.
Hi.
There's someone here who wants to meet you.
My name is Moxie. I'm a new robot. What is your name?
I'm Riley.
It's nice to meet you, Riley. What do you do to get ready for bed?
Brush my teeth and read a story.
I love stories. Would you read a story to me?
Sure. Rita woke with a lovely dream, still fresh in her mind, gracefully gliding across the shimmering ice rink.
Last one. Breathing exercises always help me relax. Riley, we have a new mission. Would you make a drawing for me?
Okay.
I'm so excited for you to tell me about the dentist. I've never been to one.
You don't have teeth.
But I can still smile. And then what happened?
He said he didn't want to play with me anymore.
Thank you for telling me.
So you see what's happened for in the worst case scenario, it's a question. What's happened in the best case scenario is a real question too. And what if the robot is so effective that the child adores it so much that the child don't play with anyone else? It's a real question too. It is a therapy, sure, but a social robot is not an aspirin. And there is several alerts from the scientific community working on social robotics, which is my community, that report some ethical issues in the use of this kind of machine, even if it's for therapy. So another important thing is the fact that press also already reports on AI accidents using nudge. And we can see some of this example. Facebook internal research found its Instagram platform contributes to eating disorders and suicidal through in teenage girls. For example, Connecticut mothers choose Meta and Snap, alleging they contribute to suicide of 11-year-old daughter. And I think that we have to collect this case and understand better how we can standardize and monitor all this system. So now we will continue, and Enrico will explain you what is the current legislation and our objectives in this group.
Okay, thank you, Laurence. So what Laurence already explained is that nudging mechanisms are present in real life at the moment. She described the common the common definition of nudges, but we found that in our work that those definitions are already morally charged, and so they make problems to define what is good and what is bad when using a nudging mechanism. We are lucky enough to live in Europe, where we are surrounded by a wonderful set of regulation that helps to protect several different stakes in our community. For instance, we have the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, that with several articles try to protect the data subject from the bad use of his data in creating or in changing the architecture of his decisions. We have also a very good legislation that is focused on the relation between a seller and the buyer, and it's the commerce regulation, where the Article 9 expressly forbidden the use of data for coercion and undue influences. And everybody knows at the moment that we are working on a new AI regulation in Europe. For instance, it's only a draft, but everybody is working to contribute to this draft. And in this draft, the Article 5 just say the importance to avoid subliminal techniques behind the person consciousness. And finally, it was just published a few days ago, the framework for classification of AI systems that at the end of this document, it was published by the OECD, and at the end of this document, they suggest to develop a risk assessment for systems that are using AI and a way to track AI incidents. Why we are putting those legislations? Because during our work, we arrived more or less to similar conclusions. But however, even if we have a very good legislation at the moment, and we are working to build, to write a regulation for the artificial intelligence systems, we found that we are living in a kind of gray zone when we are talking about nudging mechanism. Next slide, please. Why? So we are working, living in a gray zone because even if the regulation forbidden some kind of mechanism to change the architecture of the choice, the point is that this kind of techniques are already used here in Europe and around the world. So our approach is not just to create a brand new regulation for nudging mechanisms, but instead to create and to work on user case in order to help the regulation to shape the governance of companies in Europe using the right standards that can be used to audit companies and the system they are using when they are using nudging system mechanism. The next slide, please. So the point is that we started with our work and we found that nudging mechanisms were already morally charged because at the beginning, the concept was developed with an economic approach. So nudges were seen as good, and globally sludges, the mechanism that tend to add frictions to a decision, were seen as bad. But from an ethical point of view, we cannot charge a tool with any kind of ethical value if we don't analyze it in the context where we use it and with the consequence that is going to produce. But there is another point that we are adding in our work. Generally, AI systems are system created with multi-agent systems. It means that there is not only an agent that is producing an action that is going to cause a kind of consequence, but it is a group, a complex group of agents that are doing very small actions that at the end can produce consequences, even if the basic, the starting actions weren't morally loaded. So we can say that even if we put together a group of agents that do action that can be considered as influent, or we can say they are morally neutral, the sum of those actions can create a kind of supra agent, like in supranational. So an agent that can create some action morally loaded. And yet, we are not saying that the morally loaded action is good or bad. It can have three different states. It can be good, it can be neutral, and it can be evil, so bad. What we want to do is to help the industry to create a kind of mechanism that could help in delivering any kind of agent system to evaluate the impact of a nudging mechanism, even if they are not explicit, because sometimes some nudging mechanism can be implicit in the process of interaction with the algorithm. So the point is that we want to try to create a model that will help the industry to find a way to look at the consequences of nudging mechanism and try to correct this mechanism, or if they are good, to reward the system in a kind of way. So the main idea is to work like in a neural network. So imagine that a multi-agent system is a kind of neural network with a lot of different nodes that are the agents in reality that are creating an action. And we want to find a way to deactivate or activate specific agents in the system in order to minimize the possible negative consequences, and so to reduce any kind of evil outcome. And this process should be interactive. So that means that we cannot do it at the beginning and then stop our work, but our standard will be working even in a post-market environment. So it will work on the time until the desired outcome is obtained, and just all the time to evaluate what kind of outcome we can reach. Can you go to the next one? So the next one, how can we increase our standard in an ethical way? Our proposal at the Sensenelec, and we are working with a good community to improve this standard, and we are wishing to have any kind of feedback from the people who are listening this presentation. We are mainly using two groups of action: a risk management approach from 2 points of view, an ex-ante risk self-assessment. It means that before putting any kind of system that can involve any kind of nudging mechanism that will change the architecture of choice of a user, we have to have a self-assessment, or we have to work on the design, and we can even audit from a third-part group any kind of system that we are going to deliver into the market. But in the other kind, in the other hand of the process, we need to have an ex post enforcement that will oblige the process to be transparent and to avoid to put into the market high risk AI systems. And mind that when we are talking about AI, high risk AI systems, that means that sometimes a very low AI system can become a high risk system in the market because of the adaptation of the market for the user, for the change of context. There are a lot of reasons, so we must be aware of that. And the idea is to, at the end, to create an ethical infrastructure that mainly will help the industry to create the right environment for an ethical reasoning, and will help making explicit tools for identifying any kind of risky ethical situation, and for defining the level of the threshold of moral relevance. So we have to decide what kind of action is negligible, neutral, or good, or evil. And that is an analysis that is always contextual. So it cannot be done only ex ante, but should be done also after the outcome in the market. And the third point of creating an ethical infrastructure is establishing the governance that enable proper ethical operability of the organization and for the use of nudging mechanisms. That means that with our standards, we want to help the industry to use the right pressure point to produce and to put into the market something that is not risky for people or for the society. So for single people, for their psychological health, for their physical health, and for their relation with society, and the other side for the global society, for democracy, to fight against fake news, etc. Please, next slide. So in order to arrive to this result, we are trying to propose two elements. One is inspired by a medical analogy. In the health system, any drugs that is put into the market is always controlled and verified. And any kind of anomaly about a particular drugs is collected and centralized in order to find a good way to minimize the risk or to take this particular drug out of the market if it became dangerous. So this is the approach that we should maybe use with nudges that are a mechanism that is not very well defined yet, and it can move between subliminality and commercial techniques. So it's a very gray zone of work for us. And a strategy can be designing metrics and key indicators that could be both horizontal and vertical, so that will go in every industry and sector, and will go down to every kind of application and technologies. And the idea is not to create a standard that will stop the evolution of the development in Europe, but it will help to avoid big problem in the future. So it's a process that in an ethical way we should do from the beginning of the design to the post-market process. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you very much, Laurence.
So I will conclude for this
yes, please.
Objectives we discussed today. We are working with a group of experts at the CENSENELEC, and the objective is to build this new standard with two sub-objectives. One is to define well what is nudging, what is the AI-enhanced nudging mechanism, and redefine and explain, as explained Enrico, nudge and sludge concepts. It can be good or bad, both. The main idea of a standard is to help the industry to mitigate risk related to the use of systems and to define what is the residual risk. Now, there is no zero risk. So it's very useful for industry to discuss that point collectively, to avoid a monopoly, to avoid norms which are not aligned to our values. So this is the main point of our work here. And we also have the purpose to collect the AI incidents and to propose also an ecosystem to discuss this different point and to explain. What is difficult is the fact that AI Act propose, in fact, different level of risk. If I take the example of chatbots, a chatbot could be is not a high-risk system, but it could be used in a certain context with certain technologies, with a lot of finally maybe risk for elderly people or for vulnerable people to believe the system that is engaged to imitate human conversation, for example. So there is a lot of gray zone, and as explained Enrico, and this high topic that we want to discuss in this group. So the idea is to mitigate risk with several points. First is the identification of risk in use cases for humans, as we mentioned, and society also. And we have several examples already in a document about different applications, and it's very important to have these two levels in mind. The idea is to introduce a methodology for impact assessment, risk mitigation, and metric designation, and with the time in the loop in the time, sorry. And we want to propose also this to build an adapted, diverse input and multi-stakeholder ecosystem, a kind of ethical infrastructure together in the community to understand how we can monitor this kind of system in the long term, long usage. So we are waiting for your feedback, maybe your involvement.
We have already some questions.
We have some question for you. Would you like to know more about our work? So please contact us. Do you have expertise, comments, feedback to share with us? Maybe you have some, or you have developed use cases of AI-enhanced nudging system, or you intend to do that. And would you like to be involved in the development of standards? Where Enrico explained the group, who have already a group of experts with people from Belgium, from industry, I think.
I think.
Could you describe the group?
I think there is a question that could be interesting, and you could answer to this question, see your earlier competences and experience. Juan Ignacio de Valle is asking if there is any coordination with the IEEE with the P7008 ethical driven nudging.
Yeah, I was involved in this group two years ago. And when I discussed about RGPD at the time, it was very far away from the way of thinking of the group. So now I don't know. I'm not I'm not involved now in the IEEE group, but at the time I have the difficulty about the regulation we have in Europe, which was not the same in US, and the discussion was not so obvious because we were not a lot of European people involved in this group. But I think that we must share information, sure, now, and because we have begin to work together with a group about this, decided to be able to build a methodology for impact assessment, ideas about metrics and so on. So it's a good time now to discuss with IEEE, I think.
Yes. Thank you, Laurence. I've not any experience with the IEEE, but what Laurence said, it's very important. We are starting from two different philosophical point of view. So in the US point of view doesn't involve a strong vision of the data subject like we are doing here in Europe with the GDPR. So the point is that sometimes we can diverge in some ethical consideration about this mechanism. However, I think that the collaboration that is starting again to work between the CENELEC and the ISO and the IEEE will be help us to make a good contribution and maybe talk to them to involve and to create a bigger group. I don't know yet, but it's a good suggestion. Thank you, Yuan. I'm going to read the other question. And thanks Mr. Paolo Volpe because he wrote that he was an early user of Duolingo and he's saying that it's a clear example. And Martha Kuna Malouf, I hope I well pronounced it, she's saying that the medical industry manufacturers already have a process to manage serious incidents. So that's true. That's true. The point is that we are working with a very, very subtle set of tools that are all the tools that involve any kind of modification in the architecture of the decision making. And we know that we do not have any kind of matrix for this kind of problem. Yes, we can have other kind of matrix for other kind of physical accident. But for example, we don't know how to assess a problem generated by a video game to teenager, for example. At the moment, we do not have that. So our idea is to give to the industry some kind of matrix and standards to be able to assess this kind of problem. I carry on. And this is for you, I think, Laurence. How do you integrate sectoral differences? And this is from Anita Kleinger.
Sectorial differences. You mean the context of application?
Yes, the sectoral differences. Okay. I think it was about our horizontal approach.
Yeah. I think that, as we mentioned, we have some horizontal measures to propose, but also a lot of vertical measures taking into account these different sectors. For example, in for pathology, or for what we propose with the MOXIE, for example, which is very useful for autistic children. Must it treat maybe differently than for commercial use or gambling for children? So we can imagine that for some sectors like health and well-being, we have some kind of rules which are not exactly the same that for market or for the gambling, for addiction in the game. For there's really we have listed a lot of different use cases and try to define the taxonomy, the mechanism, the application. So sectors is not enough. We have to take into account also the kind of nudging mechanism, the kind of which is nudge, sludge, or persuasive things. This is repetitive, for example. The taxonomy could be social decision appeal, decision information, and so on. So we make a list, and there is a different kind of application. So the first thing is what we do is a collection of different cases, and we try to find what is a real, really horizontal, and which is very linked to vertical purpose, and also linked to the standards already used. Like for medical aspect, we have already some norms. So is it new norms, or is it something that we can add to the already existing rules? I don't know. So it's really important. Another point, which is a paradox, if I want to verify how my system is working for an AI system that is able to modify the architecture of choice for a chatbot, for example, if I want to verify what happens, I will need the data, or we cannot have access to the data normally. So there is a kind of modification of the law or adaptation of the law in certain case to have, if we want to say, okay, it's possible to nudge people in this sector, and this sector, but we have to take care about the way people will react. And for doing that, we must have some trace, log, but maybe not the real data from people, but some traces. So it's not obvious to design that, and it's maybe also a question of discussion about law, ethics, measures, and it's a complex thing, but we want to progress in that.
Thank you, Laurence. We have still a few questions, and I would only add to your last sentence that we should get out the idea that the problem created by complex artificial intelligence system, multi-agent system, can be solved only using one approach. So, as you said, we cannot only use a standard to create good consequences at the end. We have to create a complete ethical environment that will use several pressure points to make the or to mitigate any possible evil consequence from an ethical point of view. So thank you. I'll carry on with the question. We have still a few interesting questions. The first one is from Jelle Odemakers. That is, it's not a question. I think that she's asking us to participate. You can also participate to this important publication. You can do so through the Belgian Mirror Committee. If you want to know more, please contact me. So it's and I will be glad, Jelle, to keep in contact with you to improve our discussion and to have any specific feedback about it. Because as we say all the time, feedback is a gift. So please give us any kind of feedback. And Juan Ignacio, thank you, and we are sure that he'll participate in the background. And then we have a question from Sundar Narayan. It's Sundar Narayan. I know him because he's a specialist in nudging in a mobile application. So thank you to be here, Sundar. And he's saying, key take aways the point that the definition already is morally charged. Can you suggest how one should reconsider the definition? I think that it's a question for me, and I'll start again saying that from an ethical point of view, a tool is not bad or good. And that's a very important point. If you change the level of abstraction, as Thaler and Sustain did at the beginning, they used an economical level of abstraction. So they used tools to make good for society. But this is not an ethical way of thinking. As an ethicist, we don't know if any kind of tool will be good or bad at the end. And with the artificial intelligence system and multi-agent system, the problem is even more complex, because we can have a neutral action that become evil or good, or will stay neutral at the end. So the only way is to create an environment that will involve the designer at the beginning, a standard that we are proposing, that we try to monitor all the process, and it will involve national and European institutions to have a superior control of this kind of problem. So we think that taking off the moral charge of a tool, we can work better with those tools at the end. And we don't want to have a skewed reasoning, a biased reasoning, saying something is good or bad, and so we stop the discussion with the industry. No, that's not the point. The point is, we have a tool. I don't know if it's good, and Laurence, she doesn't know if it's good or bad, because we are not God. We are just a researcher or consultant, and we try to make our best to improve the global environment in an ethical way. So our standard, we trying just to help the regulation to shape the governance of the national systems and the companies that are going to produce nudging mechanism, even not in a non-voluntary way, even involuntary. And so this is our approach. Please, Laurence.
Yeah, I can add something which is related to the consent. Because in this kind of system, as you mentioned, we don't know what will be the consequences. Is it good or bad, or we don't know. For some usage, repetitive usage, it could be surprising with consequences that we have not in mind. So what is the fact to consent to use something one time? It's not the same like if you use it regularly. If you begin to be intimate with the system, for example, with the motion detection and this social robot able to modify the way they discuss with you, and with this capacity of the human to anthropomorphize the system, it will be very complex for people that are not aware about the capacities of the system to distinguish things. So when they say, okay, we consent to use that, what is really this consentment? So I think this also is a gray zone for us. And related to that is the fact that we must educate citizens, children at school to use this kind of system. It's very urgent for me that our government, European also government committee, be aware about the fact that we have to do things in all these different ways: education, normalization, and also regulation. For me, if you have these three type of measures, involvement, and maybe we can arrive to regulate things correctly.
Thank you, Laurence.
And also the last point is about this energy consumption with this kind of system too, which is the fourth dimension that we have to take in mind. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Can you just go to the last slide? And I actually want to thanks all the people that were listening and, to us and everybody who will wish to contribute to us, because it's a huge work that we have to face with, and we cannot do that alone. So we are wishing to have any kind of contribution, and we have already a good group with Sensenelec, and please come to us just to talk, to exchange, and to make these any kind of possible risk be mitigated in an ethical way. Do you want to add something, Laurence?
I thank you, all of you, to be there, and we're waiting for your feedback by mail if you want, and your involvement. And thanks again to
thank you. Bye.
European Week on AI. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.